I just say deep lane swap ward in range of turret, and I'm like, okay.
Like lane swaps are obviously a hot topic for competitive league in general.
Even with that said, this was one of the worst I've seen in my life.
Oh yeah, it was miserable.
God.
So do you remember this?
Oh my god! Yes, I do.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Cloud9 Kia Forecast, episode 5. I'm Meteos, and today we're joined once again with Raz, and this is Emily's first time.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you for coming.
You.
So, LTA. we're doing our first North versus South playoffs right now. We just finished the first round where all the South teams are eliminated.
Yeah. Raz
didn't
gets
see
to
that one
gloat.
coming. Look. Okay, so I did a bet basically on broadcast with Kangas because he thought at least one team from the South would make it. I was like, "There's no way." Especially if you watch the games from them in like the LTA South coming up, I was like, their macro was so bad that I didn't think it was possible, even if we just like consistently messed up.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how it felt watching the games. It was like, I was doing the coaching with Doublelift and Pubelter, and every game we were watching, we were just saying like, yeah, they know how to play for the first 20 minutes, and then no matter what, they're gonna troll it and just lose. So, they did manage to take one game off Liquid, but overall, fairly one-sided. Are either of you guys planning on going to Brazil for any of it?
We'll just be here working throughout the time. In fact, we have like a block party that's going to be happening on finals day, so that'll be fun. But at some point, I have to go because, like, in the office we have like people who are working there that are Brazilian. They'll always give me like a recommendation or something about a restaurant, and of course, I don't have the memory to remember like it, so I'm gonna have to ask them again. But I've heard great things, so I definitely want to check it out.
Yeah,
but at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I had a really fun time when I was there in 2017 for MSI. We went to Rio, so I've never been to Sao Paulo before, and I think it'd be cool because, again, like for me personally, I actually like started covering CBLOL back in 2014, and I watched Brazil for a really long time until I didn't have time to do it because I had to watch something else or I had to do like LCS. I had LCS in the mornings and call times are early, but I would like to go back again. It'd be really fun.
Yeah, because you're kind of Miss Worldwide with watching League. Like, you follow all of it.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, who would you say is the faker of Brazil, formerly CBLOL? Like, who is just their most
That's
famous,
actually a really good question.
popular player? Because I don't know a whole lot about them personally. There's some names that I see show up at Worlds and whatnot. Like, I know Tinones, Robo, but as far as their domestic scene, I don't really know much about it.
I have a name. Just throwing your name.
No, I'm curious to see because, like, if I think mid laner, I feel like despite the fact that there have been like previous mid laners in the past that I think captured the culture and popularity, like Kami would be the first one that I'd think of, and then BRTT as as an AD carry. But I think at this point it has to be Tinones, honestly. Like, when it looked kind of like, okay, maybe through team fighting they can kind of drag C9 down and like maybe get some punches in. I was looking up his old Ahri game against Alliance because I was curious. I was like, oh, he's on Ahri this game. Like, that'd be kind of a
was that Kaboom?
really distant. Yeah, he was on Kaboom
he's really
in
played since
2014.
Kaboom.
Yeah.
Wow, same dude. That's actually crazy.
Yeah, so that's the first. I don't think he necessarily captures like, and he's had a lot of ups and downs in his career too. Like, he hasn't been consistently in that conversation. I'm curious to see who you would say, because I also thought of Takeshi as well, but obviously he's retired now too.
The moment you said BRTT, I was like, okay, but I was thinking Revolta.
I miss watching him play.
Yeah, because he was a personality. He was such a fun personality. That INTZ team I thought was truly special.
Yeah, they were.
During that time, especially since, look, it may have upset some EDG fans as well at Worlds. So that was my thought. But to your point, there are a lot of players that are still hanging around and playing professionally right to this day. That shocked me, right? So like, yeah. So that was a good call out. So
yeah, I was asking Audie a similar question on the dive, and I think he said Robo as far as like a really popular player who stands out. But I mean, I guess not every region's going to have a faker, like someone who's that dominant, obviously. But, it's cool to hear about the other leagues, like, who are their idols, who are their most popular players and whatnot. So
yeah, I mean, I think they just have so many stars because the fans are rabid. They have a lot of fans too. A lot of those players end up like, if they retired, they have like pretty successful streaming lives and personalities. And then you'll have BRT that's like, you know what? F it, I'm unretired.
Coming back.
We have a few like that
he
too.
He did an Uzi, essentially.
True.
Because
Like,
Uzi also came back on EDG.
the man was 30. He's like, I don't care.
Doublelift's done it a few times too. I don't know if you guys caught it, but he put together like a little amateur team to do NACL.
We've been following it.
Yeah, and I've been coaching them in their scrim.
Respect to you, by the way.
Yeah, how's that been?
Yeah.
It's pretty fun, honestly. Like,
nice.
I haven't done any full-on coaching like that, but I've been around a lot of coaches, like good ones, bad ones, and I feel like I've learned some things. I don't know if I'd be the best coach of all time, but so far it's been going pretty well. Like, they've given me feedback that, like, they like it. So
something I noticed about your playing career, this is like during the time in 100 Thieves where like the main team was really focused on playing slow and controlled. And then your academy team was like fucking crazy. And then like I thought like you were always the type of person that cared a lot about the setup and the control, about the process, at least like me outside looking in. So it was very funny just seeing how like, I don't know how it was for you when it was in the academy team, because that team looked like they just had a lot of like, they didn't care. But I thought that would make it really cool to see you in a coaching role because you already had that value. You're a jungler, so like it's gonna probably tilt you when someone's just like trolling on a setup. So how was it like just basically starting the coaching? Did you like it?
I thought it was fun. It feels pretty rewarding because I don't know, even though I don't have a ton of interest in playing anymore, just being around the teams and participating in like the scrim culture and just having that perspective is so fun, which is also why, like watching the C9 versus FlyQuest scrims was so fun because when you watch two teams play competitively, it's super different than when you're actually watching it from one team's point of view. You hear their comms, you see their vision, you have to make reads on like, anticipating what your opponent's going to do, gathering information, using that information. So all that stuff obviously was like, it's what I really enjoyed about the game. And so getting to like be part of it again is always fun. I think I'm always going to like it.
Hell yeah.
I remember talking to Bjergsen after he had coached and then kind of came back and I asked him, what is like the one thing you've learned from coaching now, like going back into the game because you see the game so differently? Obviously, as far as I know, you have no plans to return to competitive play, but like, what do you think you've learned from even your short stint of coaching this team in terms of like the way you look at the game from outside of it and inside of it?
I mean, I think the biggest thing for me has for sure been draft because it's always the meme to like, say the coach is solely responsible for the draft. But I kind of get it, I kind of had a reputation for being like, one of the few players who like speak out against coaches because I think some of them just don't know what they're talking about, honestly. But at the same time, there is a struggle because people will always like draft gap and whatnot. And as a coach, you're kind of fighting between like, okay, do I pick Braum for my support and get us a good team comp, or do I pick Pyke so they're not miserable? And it's kind of like that with every role. It's like, you need the front line, you need the good team comp, but it won't always give your team a good laning phase or something that like they necessarily have fun playing. And then sometimes you'll get people like quiet quitting where they're like, yeah, man, I'll play the tank. Like I'll totally play him and, oops, 10 deaths. Yeah. My bad. Guess it wasn't a good pick. And so that kind of thing is coaching, I think, is really hard because at the end of the day, like when I was playing, I always said it's like it doesn't matter what the coach knows. Like it's the players. Yeah. So I've never felt like a coach should have authority over players. I feel like you should be like kind of like on their level or something like that. So yeah, I mean it's fun. It's fun to be part of, but I don't know. Really, I don't have any long-term plans for it. Okay. But I'm enjoying it so far. It's been cool. And it's cool to just like have the other perspective on things. You can tell a player every single thing they need to know. Yeah. But it really depends how receptive they're going to be to it. Yeah. And ultimately, League isn't really a game where there's like one definitive thing you should do at any point in time. True. Look at the top teams around the world. They'll assess the same situation differently. Yeah. So I think a huge part of it is somewhat luck in the sense of like just getting players that see eye to eye.
Yeah.
That's also one thing that I really, really liked about doing this Doublelift project is because for a long time, one of my, I guess, complaints since franchising has been the way that it doesn't feel like the early days of League where, when I first joined C9, I was just asked to sub for them. It was like non-committal. I played, really liked the vibes, felt like we got along well, and I was like, hey, can I join?
Yeah.
And it was like the players were deciding, where nowadays a lot of it is kind of like outside your control. And you get teams where there are people who are playing with players they like genuinely have no respect for, hate working with, like players will like trash talk their teammates behind their back and whatnot. And it just turns into these like really dysfunctional teams. And so obviously like that's not ideal for anybody.
Yeah.
So I think it's really cool to just be able to like, have this situation where, if two people super disagree on a team, it's like, we could not do this, if we don't need to butt heads, we don't have to work together. Like we should do it if we want to. Otherwise, no obligation.
That's true.
So that's really fun. Returning back to LTA a little bit, do you guys watch Cloud9 Kia content?
Most of the time. I think this week was bad for me, so I didn't actually check. I just had to ask.
Yeah,
but I do.
I am really bad about watching team content.
That's fine.
Super upfront about that. If you ask me about the game, I'm there.
Most of the
if you
time
ask
when
me about shoulder content, I probably haven't seen it.
Most of the time when I do, I will try and watch C9 Kia content, most because like your players are just fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
So.
The team's super. I love watching Sven content. Like, I was so happy when I heard he joined the team. Like, that's just that's good stuff. But going into the games that we watched, let's start with the Cloud9 games.
Let's do it.
What'd y'all think about it? I saw you had a whole notebook.
This is just like drafts for every game and some notes. But I was like, man, I have to like cast my mind back to the first game, like really dig deep. It's a long day. Everything melds together.
You'll remember that one moment.
I just say deep lane swap ward and range of turret, and I'm like, okay. I remember exactly what happened, and it was no joke, one of the worst lane swaps I've ever seen a team execute. From Loud. Like,
it was crazy.
Everything that could go wrong went wrong.
100%. I mean, watching it was a fever dream because it was like, okay, we're diving a Cassante with a level 4 Zyra standing directly behind him. I was so confused watching.
I'm like, didn't zone off of XP.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, okay, the only way this remotely works is if you like bait that you're going to dive on Cassante, make Zyra overstep, and then turn on her.
Yeah.
But it was just like, nope, we're just going to tank into Cassante's W, and we're dead. So that was crazy.
You know what's funny? Because like the moment I saw that ward got placed down, I was like, this literally reminds me of, I think it was like 2016 lane swap meta. Because that is the ward you place, right? So, but when it was in turret range, I'm like, okay, guessing game, let's see if they get because they're trying to match. So they see Rel there, they're probably just like thinking that they're matching bot lanes. That didn't happen. And it was so bizarre to me that they're willing to go through with it. Because I think a lot of the times when you get the setup, like for instance, when the jungler's like, I'm already on this side of the map, we've already dedicated, like the top laner also, like they're joining us. He was not level 1, he was not level 2 either. Like the Olaf, he was still level 1. So your jungler is down camps because Blabber is able to get the full clear. The ward was like cooked. And then on top of that, when the wave got bounced back, they ended up diving the Olaf. That
was the flash of Valkyrie, the equalizer.
Yeah.
It was not
good.
Good.
My God. So yeah, it was not good. And I think in general, when we talk about the like LTA South teams not having great macro, lane swap is usually like the number one thing on the list where you're like, oh, if we're just better than them in terms of like understanding the map play, just lane swap versus them.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think so many people now, like lane swaps are obviously a hot topic for competitive league in general because I think there are some players, some fans that kind of enjoy it. But to me, I've always seen it as like, okay, you only enjoy it if it's a novelty, like you haven't seen it before, because once lane swaps get solved, it's like you're invalidating the entirety of the laning phase, which is, like I've always said, the competitive experience cannot be that far removed from the solo queue experience because obviously there's going to be differences, but when you queue up top lane in solo queue, you're laning versus a top laner. You're not laning against 4 people tower diving you at level 1.
Yeah.
So obviously that part has been sad to see how long it's gone on. I think Riot has like tried some solutions, but has not quite got it yet.
Yeah, so I think like I'll say I'm definitely the biggest lane swap defender I know, and so at this point, if even I am like, okay, like they're pretty solved and they're also a lot more rudimentary, because I think of two reasons. Like you see teams doing less interesting things with lane swaps now than you saw last year, and a lot of that is due to preseason changes, and a lot of that is also due to like how now with a combination between the added turret damage and then additionally how much you have to keep early objectives in mind. Like FlyQuest previously, one of the things that made their lane swaps kind of interesting was how they would set up on the map to distribute XP, get to a point where they were just massively overloaded on XP and gold in certain positions that they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
But that meant that they would give up some early objectives, right? Like they would occasionally give up, especially like a lot of early drakes for it. And you can't really do that now. Like you're on much more of a timer because of feats, and you can't do cool dives anymore because of
Loud did a cool dive.
Did it work?
No, but it was really cool.
It was cool.
Did it work? But yeah, like that's my big thing is like, now the part that I really loved about them, like the more strategic, like interesting things about how you are distributing XP and like where you are on the map, that's completely taken away, I think, in current lane swaps. Like I do think it's pretty boring, and I do think it's really rudimentary. And even with that said, this was one of the worst I've seen in my life.
Oh yeah, it was miserable because when I started, lane swapping was a huge thing. I remember my very first ever competitive game, I was playing against a lane swap that went mid with a blitzcrank, and I got like my blue and my red hooked away from me.
Oh,
so I just got no buffs,
so tilting.
And I was like, whatever, man. Like, well played. I'm totally playing the game. And so, yeah, I mean, there are some interesting strategical aspects for sure, but at the end of the day, it's like, it's just too game warping for something so early on that there can be a lot of like rock, paper, scissors aspects of it too. It's like, you know, you guess where they went and oops, got it wrong.
Exactly. And to your point, that's how I feel too. I want the game that's being played competitively as close as possible to the game that's being played live, because we want to build stars, and the best way of doing that is a player. This is like, everyone's had this experience. When I got into the league and I was in university, and I was like, damn, I suck at jungling. And my teammates don't want to jungle. My friends don't want to jungle. So I'm willing to do it. I'm just going to watch like a St. Vicious or Odd One stream or something like that and learn how to jungle. And I did that through watching the streams and then watching competitive. And even though that was just jungling, I was like, I'm taking tips from who I perceive to be like the experts in their field. And so if you're trying to play top lane and you're trying to learn how to play Camille matchups, or you're trying to learn how to play Cassante, because I'm like, I want to aspire to be better, so watch the best. Now I'm watching someone just get like playing versus like 3 or 4 members and like being kept to CS at 4 or 5 minutes. You're like, that sucks. I'm not learning anything. So that is a big thing for, I think, our scene. That's a big reason why, like a good example is like we're trying to push to play live patch for a game, just so it's as close as possible to our viewers. So it stinks. I mean, technically, yeah, you can lane swap in solo queue. It's not happening. It never has happened, so it's not going to happen.
Somebody's gonna grief you. Like, what top laner is gonna agree to a lane swap? It
has to be a friend group. The only time I've ever,
even on pro teams where everyone's paid to play the game, top laners still never want to do it. You're like, hey, we all have terrible matchups in a terrible early game. Let's lane swap, and they're just like, They just don't say anything. They're like, maybe if I don't agree, they won't do it.
Yeah, I'll just walk top. And they'll get the message.
Because it sucks. It's like you're just, at best, you're still going to be behind. It feels bad. It's like a lose-lose. So I'm really hoping Riot does something about it, because I think the worst is when they wait. They try these like incremental changes. They've done a few things here and there, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh well, MSI is next patch. We don't want to change the game too drastically before a big tournament or whatever. Yeah. So I want to see some like big changes sooner rather than later. Hopefully we get something.
Agreed.
But so going on to the first C9 game, like they played the Zyra Wei draft, and Sven had a really sick Corki game. You know, he got super fed.
It was really cool seeing him do the 1v1. That was like just because we had been hyping up, and I actually do think Root is by far and away like their best.
Is it Root or Route?
I think it's
I've always said Root, and they told me Root, so I just go for Root.
I think more because I'm from Massachusetts than anything else.
Okay, that's fair. I don't know. I don't know which one. I'll say either.
Oh, yeah.
We'll
you are also from Massachusetts. I forgot, aren't you?
For like the first half year of my life.
Yeah.
I was born there.
Oh, okay. You were born there. Never mind.
It's like my sister being like, hey, I was born in Italy, but after a year as a baby, I went to Canada.
All right. Well, I spent the majority of my, until college in Massachusetts. Yeah. And I think that's how most people from Massachusetts.
All right, let's go with Root then. Let's go with Root.
I think he's their highest mechanically skilled player. So it's cool to see Sven just be like, yeah.
Yeah, it was weird watching that 1v1 because Root died with both summoners up.
Yeah.
It was super weird because I had gone to that series also hearing really good things about him. I think it was Audie on the dive saying that he was viewed as one of their best imports ever.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just watching Sven take him out, it's brings a tear to your eyes. That's our
It really
boy.
does. It's yes, he's back. OG Niels.
That's our Danish American.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I've seen Root play out of his mind, not only when he was playing in the South in the first leg of the tournament, but also just when he was on Loud for every event, anytime they're in play-ins, he is their best player by a wide margin, and he would outplay in team fights. You're right. He had sums, and he looked like he was positioning on the wall to flash over the wall. Just didn't do it. I was like, okay, well, all right, understandable. I think, Loud was not only just, I think they were playing nervy, but I thought they were just a worse team playing nervy. I was really, I think, shocked with how good C9 has looked. Just outside of the series, even in the, last week or when they were playing, trying to remember, who did they qualify through? FlyQuest, right? FlyQuest.
Yeah.
And they were out team fighting FlyQuest. I like their drafts. I like the fact that they're really coherent unit in fights. And they just squeezed out Loud throughout the series. So it was actually really nice to see. I think the biggest beneficiary of all of it has been Thanatos because he had the whole aura of amazing in lane, and then outside the laning phase, kind of lost, not playing team fights well. Even Bippo said in a podcast that it looked like he was being micromanaged. That didn't look like the case at all. And I think a lot of that's probably a combination of having a stronger understanding of the language, now being here for another split, basically. He was here for less than a year. And then, of course, just getting and receiving feedback. That's what Sven has talked about with him, is how good he is with feedback. So that all makes sense, and he looks like a better player.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome to hear. It's always so hard, moving to a whole different country, different culture, different language, everything. But it's been really cool seeing them do well.
He's the best top laner right now in the LTA.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he crushes every matchup, basically. It's so rare that he'll get behind on these high skill matchups, which I always feel like that's one of the biggest assets you can have as a team, which, I mean, right now it's kind of devalued from lane swaps a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But when you have one of those top laners, because, dude, top lane's a tough guy role. You can't be scared up there. These matchups are so, they can be so technical. They're, a lot of times you're forced to all in. You just have to know the matchup so well. They can snowball out of control.
Yeah.
And so being able to get advantages in those is just so massive for your team. It makes it so, you just have such a huge point to play around. So he's been doing awesome, obviously. It's been really cool to see.
Yeah, I really enjoyed listening to, because I was watching C9's stream for the scrims, for a lot of the stream scrims versus FlyQuest. And it was cool to hear how much Loki and Thanatos really contributed to their overall calls and stuff like that. And it was also funny because I talked to Blabber when he came on Pros, and he was like, yeah, Loki is great because I was known as the scrim inter, but now I have someone who will just follow my call. And so part of that is just really funny, right? Because obviously, if you have two people doing one thing together in unison, you probably have a higher chance of it working out than just Blabber going in by himself and the rest of the team being good luck.
True.
But I also think it speaks to a larger thing that I've seen on the C9 team, which is just that their coordination is so much better. Whereas last year, it felt like just a bunch of really good mechanically skilled players that weren't always communicating very well.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that I will always defend to the death. If somebody makes a call, I'm never going to fault someone for following it. And that was actually one of the biggest things that I would disagree with people on in my former teams, because they'd be like, if it's a bad call, just call it off. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. If somebody's really confident about a call, then let's just do it. And And if it turns out it was a bad call, then like they can learn from it and not make that call again.
True.
And so I love just seeing people commit because that hesitation is gonna like that'll lose you so many games, right? It's like somebody makes a really insane call, but instead of automatically following it, you thought about it and you missed your window, and now it's just a mess.
It reminds me of the first leg in LTA North because like 100 Thieves is a crazy ass team. They're still the bloodiest team in the world right now, and a lot of it is like Quid goes in, dude, you're following him. Like you actually have to. Meanwhile, I was watching Shopify's games, and there's one instance that was like happening bot side fight. It's for a random game, I can't even remember, but it'd be like their AD went in, and you're looking at like Fudge and their support. They're not really following, and you're like it's okay if you lose. Just like you got to go for it because it seemed like he saw the angle and it looked fine.
Yeah, I mean, mentioning 100 Thieves, like that's the next game we can talk about because they were our first seed, which I think surprising to kind of everybody. And I think a lot of people still probably don't consider them to be our first seed as far as strength goes, which, you know, it is a little weird because we're seeding teams after like 3 weeks of games or whatever. So yeah, I don't think anything's too finalized. I think a lot of people still probably see FlyQuest is like the big dog.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, they are a first seed, and they had their series versus Pain, and it was a bloody one. It was not clean at all. They managed to 2-0, but like, how'd you feel watching that?
So we checked, and they are still the bloodiest team if you're considering like combined kills per minute. Raz has been tracking this for the past 2 years, I think, with 100 Thieves now.
It's so funny.
And they're just above LGD in the LPL.
Yeah. Wow. So it's not necessarily a good thing.
It's fun.
Yeah, exactly.
It's good for viewers.
But the big thing I think that made the difference, because they also said, and I think some of our teams were nervy, especially in the first game, but they have also said as a team that, especially adding FBI, it's not necessarily more of a, he is more stable than their prior ADCs. But he's also going to have a loud voice while also being completely willing to go in on a lot of these fights. And I know that's something that they never wanted to lose in their identity was whoever they added. They still want to be a team that just fights constantly. Yeah. And the meta with having like, oh, check your watch, it's Grubs. Oh, check your watch, it's Dragon. Oh, check your watch, it's Otacon. Really suits 100 Thieves, I think, because they already want to go for the fight, so then it's just a matter of setting up for it. I do think, conversely, that was the LTA South's best window into taking out any of the LTA North's teams, was because if you're going to overcome these teams that do actually have better macro than you have to drag them into disadvantageous fights, right? And so I think we did see that a few times in the 100 Thieves Pain series.
Well, you got a whiff of it in start of game 1, where G-Time like loses his flash in Tribush and then commits still to the level 1 and dies, and then actually gets the solo kill on Sniper bot lane because Sniper thinks that he missed 2 Cassante Qs, fine, but like that just happens a lot to 100 Thieves, where it's like you have a really hard winning position, but then they'll find like a random fight or a pick that they think can get, and they're wrong. You're like, okay, so you had a lead, you lost your lead. And then it goes to your point, Meteos, where after 20 minutes, they just lose their mind. And I did like a Telestration hit, like a segment basically, where I focused on one time where like Pain has push in like all 3 lanes, like their 3rd dragon is gonna come up. They're setting up for 3rd dragon fight, and they all have they have full setup and vision around Drake, and then they see Sniper they think is overextending bot. So they just 4-man chase him and then lose all of their vision for it. And then 100 Thieves takes the fight. They just eke out a victory. And you're like, that's crazy. So I think Pain lost because they just weren't consistent with their vision. And I felt like weren't consistent with their macro. A lot of the times, they just saw a pick and thought they could chase it. And a lot of the times that bit them in the ass.
Yeah, they just see champion, run it champion. And I loved that one play near the end where like T-Tom was on Ezreal and they were chasing really far, and like you could see it in his eyes at Wolves,
he wants it.
Where like FBI was really low on Kai'Sa and he's like walking toward the wall, and I'm like, he's gonna blind Ian and try to like snipe this guy. He wants it so bad, But like, that's not a play anyone's ever going to make. And then he did it.
Yeah.
And it didn't work out. But it's one of those things in my mind. I'm like, that could have actually worked. Like, I don't think FBI would have expected someone to do that. Like, that's kind of a psycho play. But that's what makes watching them so fun, actually. Like, I think they were my favorite LTA South team to watch. Like, specifically him because, I think they had the stat for like, he was the player with the most kills and the most deaths.
Yep.
Which is insane on an 80
that.
carry.
Yeah.
That is so crazy. 80 carries normally have like the best KDAs and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's like there's not a huge benefit to dying as the 80 carry. Usually that makes it pretty hard to win, but he's just so in there that like it's awesome to watch.
He's whatever the opposite of the like siren KDA and danger meme is. It's been used for multiple 80 carries.
Upset
now.
was one of them for a little bit.
Yeah. But yeah, he's whatever the opposite of that is. That's what Teton is. Like he is just. I like really appreciate him going in on that sniper play because again, like I think sniper could have won that if he actually hit some of his cues. But like, who does that after you just got absolutely owned level 1, right? Like, and I don't know. It makes him a really special player because I see. The only other place I really see a lot of that specific type of play is LPL. And because they constantly have to go against like so much competition that's doing that, like that's what makes players like Bin, where you just ask him like, oh, why do you think you could get away with this play? And he's like, why wouldn't I be able to get away with this play? Like that's the attitude you have to have. Like,
yeah.
He is the typical 80 carry brother. Like just because he challenges your tank to get farther than him. The amount of times where I'm seeing him just like walk up alone in a team fight, you're like, they can flash on you, but he has full faith that if he's playing Caitlyn or something, like react to it with like her E or flash, like he can react. He always thinks he can react. And a lot of times he can, and he makes the outplay happen. But I was like, brother, please just play a little smarter because like they're just going to pick you. And it's happened a few times. There's one Siege top lane where he dies because he's walking too far up. And I'm like, so it is a coin flip. It is the most extreme Jackie Love tendencies I have ever seen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, classic. I mean, it was super fun to watch. The next series we actually had was FlyQuest versus Leviathan or Leviathan.
This is funny.
I can't pronounce these names.
No, this is a problem. So, like, on the topic of pronunciations.
Oh, yeah, okay. Raz and I have a bone to pick.
Okay, let's hear it.
No. You want to start? Or, I mean, I
don't know which one. You start first because there's a few things.
So, I try to get pronunciations as like accurately as possible. Like I remember reading like the Pinion chart or listening to Candace pronounce a lot of the LPL names.
Yep.
I speak some Korean. I've studied it, so that's where a lot of my pronunciation for some of the more like Korean actual words or names comes from. But there have been so many conflicting reports from the LTA South staff and players.
Yeah.
And so many players are like, yeah, I don't care. Call me whatever you want. It's like, no, we need to be unified as a broadcast.
Whenever you get like a pronunciation audio file, it's like, this is what the team is saying of their player. And it's like, that just sounded like both names. Because like there'll either be like an accent or the audio will be a little finicky or just like the person saying it is not the player. And you're like, that solves nothing. That actually made it worse.
Yeah, because with Pain, like Teton or Cheeton or Titan or whatever people call him, it's like, I at first I was saying Titan because that's, how it's would be pronounced in English. And then people were saying like, no, it's Teton. I'm like, okay, Teton. And then people were like, no, it's Cheeton.
Yeah.
And then on the dive, we were talking to Audie and he said it's Teton again. So I'm just like, I don't know.
It's doomed.
It's one of those.
Recently, a player that we've basically, at least today, was like had a problem with because like throughout for his entire career, we called him Miru. Yep. And it's just Miru. He's the Korean mid laner.
Yeah.
And then recently we heard it's actually what is it?
Mareo.
Mareo.
It's like Mareo.
Mareo, but then the audio file said it just like it could be considered both. So we're like, okay, this is what's gonna happen.
It's too hard. It's
too much. It's too much. So it's Leviathan, but that's it is what it is. Leviathan. It happens.
Yeah.
That team was fun, and a lot of it is the Cody team, right? Like Cody is so good, man. At least he was the one I was really impressed with from the LTA South because, like, I've known him from when he was playing in Infinity. Now, of course, when he was on LLA, when they went international, you're losing almost every game. That's what's going to happen. but he was a person that was like not afraid to make plays happen with his Ari or Talia. He was always going to be the reason why they at least had a chance in their games. And I was excited to just see how him and their top laner, Zopde, would work. Because those are just like the best solo laners from the LLA, bar none. So I was like, okay, just go for it. If it's going to be Zopde on Mbessa and Cody on like Talia or something, they have a shot. That may not have happened.
Yeah, and I think they got a really rough draw against FlyQuest, right? Who, like, I still think, despite falling to C9, have a really good understanding of map movement. Like, that was their strength all last year. It was their strength at Worlds. I don't think that's changed this year either, in addition to kind of some of their compositional creativity. And they, like, Leviathan got a bad draw. It was rough for them, and because of this. But then also there were, like, in the second game, I remember it was Scary's Nidalee, right?
Yeah.
Where he is just
fasting Nidalee,
trying to make a gank happen and not farming.
Yeah, he had
Meanwhile,
20 CS.
Inspired solos 2 Drakes in that same game. As, like, basically they became camps to his Lilia.
He was close to 2 levels up. He was close.
It was insane.
Against the Nidalee. You probably did when you were watching the game, is putting yourself in that position where you're a Nidalee, you don't have setup in any lane. Like,
oh, yeah. I mean, it did not look like a Nidalee game whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I thought he actually, like, was kind of doing okay. You know, like, he was finding some stuff, but to me, the game just felt like FlyQuest bot lane was kind of checked out a little bit. They were, like, Boosie was playing Pyke in game 2, and I am just kind of a Pyke hater. Like, I think this is a completely for fun champion, and you're picking a support and trying to do vision control. Like, they took out Legend Tenacity, they took out Unflinching, and so he's just going to get CC'd in one shot in every single case. He cannot get health. Like, I think he's a borderline troll pick. So obviously that made the game a little bit hard for FlyQuest, but it never felt like it was, you know, particularly close in any of the games. Like, Inspired is just so good. If the game goes the way he wants it to go, it doesn't really matter what anyone else is doing. Like, he's just going to take over. So, yeah, obviously FlyQuest looked really good. Bwipo game 1, insane Volibear game.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I think, yes, Bwipo was pretty wild, especially that 1v4 that he had on in the top side tier 2 to tier 3. But you already mentioned, Emily, that they had a bad draw. Usually when I hear they have a bad draw, I'm like, okay, we think they're the best team. Like,
oh, yeah. No, they weren't. It's more like, I think they would have looked better against a team that wasn't FlyQuest and who wasn't going to, like, of all teams, I think FlyQuest are absolutely, of all LTA North teams rather, FlyQuest are absolutely the team that will take the least amount of bad fights for the most part, right? Like, they would much rather not have you fight them and kind of move you around the map so that you don't. And that makes it difficult for, I think, a team with a lesser macro understanding to kind of goad you into a fight where they might be able to come out ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it was for sure tough. And that actually takes us to the last game we just had, which was where Brazil got their first win against Team Liquid.
True.
That was pretty hype series.
That was crazy. Oh my God. I swear Jose just has Umti's number. Every Baron. It was just Smite stolen, it felt like. I'm pretty sure. Also, everyone said it. I think it was the series prior. I think actually Cloud9 talked about how Isurus Astral was like the best team in the South that they played against by far. I was like, okay, I can see that. Because Jose and the bot lane of Snaker and Ackerman, they played together on Astral.
Is that Snaker or
It's
Snacker?
It is Snacker.
I heard both.
Yeah.
It is Snacker.
But I'm saying, where's the C? That's not how you spell snack.
Yeah,
That's how you spell snake.
Yeah.
It is Snacker. And then the pronunciation dog had another one. I was like, God. But it is Snacker. You're right.
Okay.
So yeah, like they play together when they were on MSI, I think last year. They looked really good together. Like, yes, their macro wasn't there last year, but they were a team that was like really unafraid of just full sending it and making a play happen. And I think this team just seemed a lot smarter than that iteration. So their lane swap they were keeping up. I think the team fights were tough just because, especially in the Jax game, imagine playing Jax versus GP, Ashe, and Braum, where it doesn't really feel like you can play sides because you're going to lose, and you can't take team fights because you're just going to get walked down. So I thought the draft was really hard on that one, especially when there was just too many mistakes that be made early.
Yeah. When you were talking earlier about the difference in solo queue versus competitive, like that GP game came to mind because that GP game was literally just 15 minutes of him being tower dove for the entire game. It was so comical to look. It was just every time the camera was on him, he was getting dove by all of Team Liquid just repeatedly.
Yeah.
So that looked pretty miserable.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think it's then on TL, right, to not take certain fights. Like, I remember, I think the first time where I saw essentially, like, what they saw in that team comp, because you swap and GP's life is just absolutely miserable. Even when they didn't necessarily get, I think, the level 1 dive they would have wanted to, because Core took too much turret aggro, died, and then they got the return kill. But there was the one in, like, River where the GP ult is just over the lower red side jungle entrance, and along with the Aurora ult, and you're like, okay, I can see what this team comp, like, that is the best iteration thus far in this game of what this team comp wants to do in a fight, right?
Yeah.
And since there were so many mistakes made in mid-game by TL, that GP was allowed to play the game. And to your point, once he's allowed to play the game, it's really, really difficult then for the Jax to have the same amount of impact if you can't, like, be best the GP on sides. And I do think that is where you saw how Isurus Estral ended up being the first seed, right? Because I did think they had better map understanding and better macro than any of the other LTA South teams. And I also think they had, and I'm going to say this before talking about Game 3, because there's a really obvious mistake in Game 3.
Okay.
But they had better team fight setups overall, I think. Like, they were more thoughtful with their team fight setups. Now, it was a team fight setup that I think cost them Game 3, where Bertle is coming in on the flank.
I mean, that whole Game 3, I was feeling so tilted watching it because I'm like, okay, so we're picking, like, the draft didn't make any sense to me from Isurus' perspective, since, you're up against Cassio, who's kind of like an anti-dive champion, Xayah.
Yep.
Yeah.
If the one team is a ball comp, like, they have Skarner as well, like, it was just the team you really don't want to be diving. Shen, like you couldn't get more anti-dive if you wanted to. And so then you pick Camille, Yone, Ivern, Jhin, right? It's like this kind of full AD team. It, like, in my mind, it's kind of lost some draft, but you could maybe play if you 1-3-1 and just perma-split. Like, don't ever engage them unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah.
It's so weird because I like the Ivern. The Ivern was such a good angle, and I was like, okay, you have a pretty clear idea of the comp that they're trying to make. And the Jhin was fine. It's just they tried to dive. The Camille one was a bit forced. So I agree. I think,
Yeah, but I mean, like, to me, this game should be really hard to play, and I think you should never look to team fight. You should just perma-split.
Yeah.
And then FlyQuest at some point will probably try to, like, hit Baron, and you'll have to run into them, and it'll be hard, but at least they'll be, like, tanking Baron or whatnot. But they just didn't do that. They just kept grouping, kept fighting.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm like, why are you drafting this kind of comp if you don't want to play this, like, the way this kind of comp wants to work? So it happens. I mean, sometimes you lose sight of it, but that one definitely for me, it was, like, hard to watch because I'm just like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah, that Drake fight in particular I'm thinking of, where Bertle is, like, trying to flank on Camille.
Oh, yeah, like,
and
at the end,
he just gets absolutely owned. That kind of gives TL the game. I think they did have some, like, cute plays early where I'm like, okay, if, to your point, I big agree that you pretty much have to 1-3-1 with that comp, get picks on sides, and then you can go to objective. I think overall it is actually much more difficult to play the game that way because of how many objective timers there are now and how many times you have to fight around objectives. So already that is, like, the degree of difficulty is just higher than some other drafts. But I did think they had some cute plays. Like, I did like the the brush in the river to get onto APA because he was doing so well in that lane and he was pushed up really far. So then sending the Nautilus to come in from the brush.
That was super cool.
That was cute. I was like, okay, I like what you guys are going for here, despite the degree of difficulty.
Yeah, I mean that felt like just like it was kind of like a knowledge check for TL, like TL. Obviously, like they hadn't seen that before. I feel like that's one of those things that if somebody gets you with it, you'd be more aware of it the next time. But the first time you see it, it's like it's hard to fault someone for getting hit by that. It's just like that bush was placed so long ago, and now all of a sudden there's a Nautilus and hooking me. Like, what is that?
I think overall, I liked. There were a lot of good moments I thought from APA. Because, like, there was the one time I've not seen... I mean, I expected the interaction to happen at some point, but I didn't think about it, which was, like, when Vi ulted the Talia that then used her wall and then dragged her.
That was insane.
That was hilarious. I was like, oh, my God, I've, like, never seen that, but it makes sense. And there was a timer where I felt like they were just waiting for Baron. APA was topside, but he knew that he was, basically, he was the only play that could be made upon. So he was just playing it safe, and then they... it was going to turn into a good fight, and then Empty got picked off coming in. So I thought overall, just a takeaway that I just thought Empty had a really bad day. And a lot of it came, I don't know if you've had those moments where you have one bad play or something and it starts like you're in your own head and it just starts piling up because it felt like that. It bled into team fights. I think they were genuinely better than as Isurus Estral, but they kept getting picked off when they had leads, and it started to get really weird. So what's your take on, because like either what's your assumption of what's Umpty's going through, or have you been in that position before?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's actually a really good question because I don't like ragging on players too much or coming down on them because obviously Umpty's been getting a lot of criticism this season. And I think it's somewhat natural when you've gone from being, last year, everyone spoke so highly of TL the entire year. They were just the team to beat. They were doing so well. But there was always the question of, it's like, they lane swap a whole lot. They play full tank comps a whole lot, double AD carries, whatnot. Like, how are they going to play when the game goes back to a little bit more normal in the sense of like, just standard team comps and gameplay. And Umpty has been having a pretty rough year so far. Like, he's making a lot of mistakes. In that game they lost, it kind of started with him just getting caught in the most bizarre ways ever. Like, just legitimately running into all of Isurus by himself twice in a row. Yeah. Which is like, wow, that's pretty bad. So, he hasn't been having his best performance, but I think a lot of the times... You mentioned, like, have I gone through that? And I've definitely had periods of time where, like, I wasn't playing too great. Like, if I look back at my games, I'm just like, wow, I was pretty trash this game. And usually I think that comes from, like, it can be any number of things, but a lot of times, like, if there's a lot of pressure on you or if there's, like, a lot of disagreements within the team about how you want to play, that can do it because, on one hand, it's like you have your own instincts, your own intuition on what you want to be doing. But then you weigh that against, like, what do you think your team wants you to be doing? Like, what kind of feedback have you been getting? And then sometimes that can, like, really muddy the waters and just, like, you feel confused in the game. Yeah. And then, like, the end result just looks terrible. So, I don't know. He's definitely been struggling a bit, but it's still kind of early in the year, so.
Exactly, because we haven't had a lot of games. And to the point that you had made, because he had the interview that he had with you, Emily, where he's talking about, like, we've had, like, a couple best ofs, and I could be like bad in one day and great the next, like, was just like paraphrasing his statement. And that's very much true. Like, through the vast majority of the games last year, like, he was a top 3 jungler or a top 4, whatever you want to say, right? He was definitely probably like a great glue to what that team needed of him. And I still think that's the case going into this split. The bad games are hard to understand. I don't think we'll ever understand without knowing what their comms are like or knowing what the feedback's been like internally. And they have, like, of course, like, coaching shakeup too. That can't be easy as well. So do I think he is going to get better? Yes. Do I think he will have the opportunity? There are so few games this split. Yeah. Next split's going to be a lot better because you just have, like, now a best of round robin, so you have a lot more games to play off of. But, like, it has to be tough, and I can't imagine mentally that you can be, because you're in a new environment, enemy crowds booing you.
That's actually a point
crazy.
that I thought was really interesting because I don't remember what year it was, but there was that one year where at some international event, like the North American crowd was booing one of the Asian teams. I don't remember exactly who it was.
I know what you mean, though.
It was it was in Chicago, and I believe it was Samsung.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like it could be right.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure, but I do know it happened. And I remember there was like a #1 Reddit thread, and it was just like, this is so disrespectful. Like, it's so bad, which I agreed with. I was like, yeah, like it's not cool to be booing them. But then it's just so different where in Brazil, it's like, yeah, that's just expected. Like, they hate anyone that's not Brazil. So
yeah,
I find the contrast really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind booing in anything, really, coming from like a traditional sports standpoint. The thing that was more interesting to me was how it felt like almost all of the LTA North players that we talked to were like, yeah, like we're still overwhelmed by how passionate this crowd is. Like, either they were like giggling to themselves, like Inspired very visibly was on stage when they were getting booed.
Yeah.
Or like we talked to Jan after the TL game, and he was like, yeah, there's this one guy with a Jackie Love jersey who's just screaming at me the entire time.
Yeah, I mean,
and
it's
it
way
seemed
different.
like players, at least the ones that we spoke with, which is like I guess a concentrated sample size of players who are doing remote interviews. But I think it seemed like they derived more from the booing than getting intimidated by it, right? Like, it seemed like they either were like, whoa, these fans are passionate, that's really cool, or I'm going to prove you wrong, which was kind of, I don't know, it was fun to hear from our LTA North players and how they responded to that, because it seems like they all, like, in a weird way, responded, like, positively, at least to, like, the overwhelming fan passion.
Yeah. And I'm context-based, because generally, it's like sports, just like as a fan, I'm like, it depends why I'm booing somebody. Oh, the Dallas Mavericks jam, I'm probably booing that guy.
Yeah.
Or like, if I think like for instance, if I think that someone is not putting in effort, like, you deserve to get booed. But I think in general, there are times where it is disrespectful. If you're just booing somebody because, like in the case that you mentioned, the Chicago one, where it's like, oh, you're just booing a foreign team, it's pretty bullshit. Like, that doesn't, I don't like that. And I think the USA chants are always corny, but like, at least in wrestling, it's intended. Like, that's the point. You're like, all right, it's treasy, but it works in this moment. But everything else, screw that, right? It's like the whole xenophobic thing. But in this case, it's weird because I understand what the Brazilian fans are going through. Like, they don't like the concept of the LTA to begin with.
Mm.
And so they feel like, their league is under threat, and they understand their ass. Like, it's like, hey, we know we're watching the same international tournaments, right? They don't expect their teams to like do well. Like, and I've been in those regions. Like, for instance, I lived in Australia, and there was a time where, hey, we're gonna cheer on our OPL teams. We don't expect them to win, but like, they're our guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, that's my region too.
Yeah, there it is. There are, exactly. They're our guys. So you're like, there's that feeling, but now it feels like they're getting kind of challenged even in their own region. Now we're sending like the LCS
They're being
teams.
invaded.
They're being invaded
Oh, okay.
by
okay.
LCS teams, and that sucks, right, from their perspective. So I see that. So the boos, misdirected. Shouldn't have a guy foaming in his mouth with a Jackie Love jersey looking straight at Jan. Like, that shouldn't happen. So I think it was misdirected, but I understand why they're upset, because it's going to feel mighty awkward next week where you have 4 LTA North teams in the Brazilian studio, and who knows what, like, not a lot of people are going to be happy about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Changing gears a little bit.
Let's do it.
I've got a rapid fire Q&A for you guys.
Oh, God.
Oh, God.
Just first thing that comes to mind. First of all, what was your favorite C9 league moment that you were a part of, whether it was a game, interview, content piece? Raz, you can start.
Oh, my God. Dude, when they had the C9 players take over the analyst desk for a segment, that was so funny. Like, I was just like basically behind, like, not doing anything technically I'm not doing anything there, but I was like behind the camera just watching it. I was like, that's funny as hell. So I enjoyed that a lot because no matter what, somehow for some reason, C9 will just have hilarious people on content. You guys are blessed with that. Not every team's gonna have that. Sometimes like, ooh, who are we gonna talk to? It's gonna be a little tough. Everyone's silent on that team, not C9. So I thought it was really funny.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I got to ride on the train from Seoul to Busan with C9 in 2018 at Worlds and basically do like an embed with the team. So just like hang out with them on that and then write a feature on it. And that was like so fun just to see like how the team kind of just vibes and does their own thing. There was a lot of Magic talk. There was a lot of Reaper just hung up his jacket and then just like went to sleep for 2 hours. As far away from the rest of the team as possible.
That sounds like him.
I think just because he wanted to sleep and the rest of the team was loud. But yeah, it was just a really fun experience. And it's pretty rare that I get like unfettered access to a team like that, or at least when I was a journalist, you know? So it was a fun time.
Dude, actually, I don't remember which LCS finals it was, but C9 won that finals. And I may have predicted the opposite team. And I remember like needing to find a shuttle back to the hotel, and every other shuttle was used. Guess which shuttle I had to go into? The C9 shuttle.
Classic.
And they're like, hey, that's the guy that voted against us. I was like, my bad, guys. Please accept me. That was it.
Cool. All right, next one we've got, I'll start with you first on this one, Emily. What's one part of casting that people may not realize is difficult, and what goes into a good cast?
Ooh, I think the ability to communicate information clearly in as concisely a way as possible. And I am really bad at that still. Just having started casting last year, I had so much more space on an analyst desk. And then prior to that, even more space in interviews and features, either written or video, to just talk, right? Like, so when I make a point, I would often like add so much additional context and then make the point, which is you can't do that in casting. Like you literally have to make your thesis statement and maybe you'll have time to talk about the other things you want to talk about, and maybe you don't. I'm still really bad at it. I'm trying to get better at it, but I think that's the thing. And I remember when Dom did a stint on LPL and he came out saying the same thing, right? Where he was like, wow, you really have like not as much time in a co-stream. Because like whenever I've co-streamed, like I used to hop on Kelsey's co-stream sometime and we would like skip parts of the game to go back and like look at, you know, wave management or something that our 10 viewers were definitely interested in. But you like miss parts of the game, right? Because you're not expected to be dispensing that information constantly. But that's not your job as a caster. Your job as a caster is to, in my case, as a color caster, to add as much context or analytical context to what's going on in a really short amount of time. And that's been actually really difficult for me.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. It's not easy. You got anything for that, Raz?
Hand signals for me. Being able to give space to the people around you, because that's the one thing people don't see. So there's going to be major moments, let's say big team fight call, your play-by-play is going to drop it. Someone has to pick it up, especially in a TriCast. So like being able to communicate with your co-caster who goes next, or communicate like which kind of energy you're coming in. And then also if your play-by-play is team fight calling, you can point out certain things. Most of the time TPs. So he's like pointing out to the TP so he can add that to his call. Like especially in a TriCast, it's important, but just being able to communicate with your co-caster, if it's a duo cast, like goes a long way just so you don't have any hiccups. And it makes it so you can get your point across. Like for instance, in a TriCast, you've probably been in moments where you're with some opinionated people and you need to get in there and they're gonna give you I want to get in for one little bit, and you're gonna have to smack that shit down and be like, nope, it's my point.
Yeah, 100%. I've done that because it's hard. I've definitely like used the hand signs too with some of them.
Yeah.
And like I know Kobe and Azale kind of do it like naturally in the dive sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to find that balance between, you know, you don't want to talk over each other because that's hard to listen to, and then you also don't want to have like awkward silence where everyone's like waiting for someone else to talk.
Dude, my first big lesson, and this is like, it's both casting, but it's also on analyst desk. My first international event was like, I think it was 2018 Worlds. And I was on desk with like Papa Smithy, DeFicio, and like the cast, right? I think it was Kobe 2 or something, and they're all very opinionated. So everyone's gonna want to have something to say about a desk. Desks are not that long, so they all have their hand signal up. So a lot of times I was like, oh, I'll give him some time to talk. Oh, I'll just defer to him. You're like, I didn't say shit this desk. Wait a minute.
That's the best time. You just kick back.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, I have to. It is a give and take. So like, there's gonna be moments where that happens. You do give someone space, or you're like, no, I have a point that I really want to make. So hand signals super important.
Cool. This next question is for Raz. You were casting in the LPL.
Mm-hmm.
How did that experience shape the way you work today?
Ooh, a lot of it was kind of to the point that Emily has talked about, which is being very clear and short with your points, depending on it, right? Because a lot of the times in an LPL cast, you'll come in with a prep. This is my big thing. Oh my God. Like, I came in from coaching before, and I didn't need to be like short and to the point. I can just say whatever the fuck I want. The players are going to have to sit down and listen. Or whoever is going to have to sit down and listen. But you'll go through some games where it's like LGD versus newbie. It's like Swift versus like, honestly, any crazy jungler like MLXG or something. And you're just like, team fight, into replay, into team fight, into replay, into team fight, into replay. So it doesn't matter what your prep is. You just have to follow the action.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times I treated prep differently after that, where I'm like, it's good to be prepared, but don't die by your preparation.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, this is good, but if the game is active and the game is interesting, just follow the game.
Yeah, just like going with the flow.
Exactly. Go with the flow. Don't force it, because if you force it, you're going to ruin the cast. You're literally doing the exact opposite of what you want. And I actually thought about my own craft a lot back when I was there, because I started off as the newbie that sucked at almost everything. And then when I left, I was the basically caster lead and development lead. So I was like basically giving feedback to a lot of the casters that were coming in. So that made me think about how I focused on my short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. So it changed everything about me, I thought.
Awesome.
Who is this?
This is a picture of Raz.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh, God.
So, do you remember this?
Oh, my God. Yes, I do.
Wait, what? I just want to see this for context.
Show it to her. Maybe
I'm
she
sure
knows.
They'll make it full screen.
Maybe she knows.
Oh, this was for LPL content, right?
Yeah. So, you want to explain this one?
Dude. So, we did a show on LPL called Culture Shock, where they send us to a different city in China. That one was in Chengdu, and I did so much in Chengdu. That was like a theater that was in one of like the theater districts in Chengdu, and in that theater, they had a whole bunch of things, and one of them was like a tea master that could pour tea from this long, like, whatever you want to call it, a stout, I guess, into the cup anywhere. And I don't know how they got this man to, like, I guess they paid him, but to teach me. But I was like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. So I was learning how to do that. That was one thing that was happening in Chengdu. I was like, the food was extremely spicy. I did a lot of things there.
That was the ear cleaning too, right?
The ear cleaning.
Yeah.
Dude, so apparently there's like a park that you go to that there's like a lot of people, old people mostly, just drinking tea. But you can also clear your ear out there. And look, they just bring in like 2 big metal clangers. They put it in your ears and you start hearing bang. You're like, am I going to trust this? Like, I'm going to lose my ears to this.
Oh my God.
But it came out of it like my ears completely cleaned out. It was uncomfortable at the time because I didn't expect if it was going to like be helpful.
Okay.
But it was really good. So yeah, we did Culture Shock. It was a really fun show that we did. Also, there's a really funny moment because in that same theater, they're like, oh, come in and like just wear this like Chinese dress, basically. Like it was like a whole garment for the film. And I was uncomfortable doing it because I know what would come across from it. People would be like, this guy comes into China for like a year and a half and he's immediately appropriating the culture. I was worried about it. I was like, just don't put it on the broad. Just don't put it on the YouTube channel or something. I was like, okay, we won't do it. They release it. The first thing you see, I was like, whoa, what's going on here?
Classic.
What's happening? But it was fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like a lot of fun. I haven't been to China, but one
If you go, Chengdu is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. The food, like the Szechuan food, is amazing. They got the malatang spices that like
So good.
Yeah, it's like the tingling spice. You've had that before?
I don't do spicy food.
It's a different kind of spice.
Yeah, it's not like hot spicy.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
It's
But
like,
it is like yeah. If you don't like the sensation, I love like any kind of spicy food. But yeah, I love Chengdu.
It's like
such a nice place.
tingling numbness. It's not bad because I thought after being in China that I can handle spice, so I came back and had like this. I forget what place it's called, but it was like a Halal Bros or something like that. And they had like this white sauce, and I was like, I can handle this. Died. No, I can't do that. But that was great. I enjoyed it.
Awesome.
Now I'm scared to see what.
Yeah, we're
Oh, they did the research.
Yeah, I know. Now I'm terrified.
So Emily, back in the 6th grade.
Yeah, I know, right?
you had gotten a C in your English assignment.
okay.
There's something there.
Oh yeah, so this is I recognized the picture as soon as you turned it. But yeah, this is figure skating in or it's skating
Oh my God.
in Shinsegae in Busan.
Oh, she's a figure skating nerd.
I used to. So we figured out actually because I believe Valdez used to either he played pond hockey, which I also did growing up, which was very fun. I wasn't allowed to play actual hockey because my parents thought I would die, and they didn't want that. But I did take figure skating lessons when I was like really young. So we found out I'd taken figure skating lessons. I'm pretty sure it was Valdez who'd done hockey. And then Chronicler was a speed skater.
What?
Really?
Yeah. He
Oh,
did
you told me this.
speed skating as a kid. So we had like all 3 skating disciplines represented.
That's so cool.
And then, yeah, that was me kind of dragging. I was like, do you guys want to go ice skating? Like every day I'd be like, dark day, we're going ice skating. And finally we went. And I shut up after that.
Yeah, you mentioned how you co-streamed with Kelsey, but do you talk to casters from other regions often? Like outside of the international events, do you keep up?
Yeah, I try. I'm a really bad friend and I don't, like, all of your, maybe not complaints, but like, how you say like, oh, Sneaky that never gets back to me? Like, that's me. Like, I'm really bad
that is sneaky
at getting back to people.
Sure.
But in particular, I'm really close to Chronicler. We talk a lot. And we have a lot of common interests. I went to his wedding. That was fun.
Oh, cool.
In Indonesia. Yeah, it was, oh my God, it was so pretty. Like, it was so pretty and so freaking hot.
That's amazing.
Like, you just walk outside and it's like 90 degrees Fahrenheit and like 90% humidity.
Oh God, the humidity's
but
killer.
it was like gorgeous. It was really, really fun. But yeah.
That's awesome. So you're close with Chronicler. Do you try to hang out with all the casters when you go to events or they come to where you're at?
Yeah, I try. Just because like it's really rare that I get to see people, and like the nature of esports, I think, is that you end up making a lot of friends who might not live near you just because they're through the internet. And so you can get really close to people that you've like might not have ever even met. So I try not to hibernate in my room and just watch VODs. Sometimes I need to be like dragged out a little bit or pushed because I'll get really nervous and I'll be like, no, I need to do like more VOD review and stuff. So that's actually why I rely on people like Chronicler and like Raz or like Max Atlas to just be like, you're getting out of your hotel room.
We're dragging
like,
you.
We've watched enough VODs. Like you are not going to fuck up that badly.
Yeah.
Awesome. We all need friends to drag us out once in a while.
We do. 100%.
Last one. This is for you, Emily. You used to blog about anime.
I did.
Are there any storylines in League right now that you feel are similar to an anime you've seen?
Oh man, that's tough. Because I feel like there are a lot of League of Legends player stories, especially like like the person kind of just every year they get closer and closer and closer to winning worlds or something like that. I think that's like a lot of shonen anime stories, I think. And the nature of the World Championship is that it's so difficult to win just because of the way League of Legends as a game works and the way it changes every year. So I can't think of like something specific off the top of my head, but I think like a lot of, like for example, the two that are coming to mind right now that could kind of go through that story arc if they ever win Worlds would be, I think, Chovy or Bin. Just because, like, for example, Bin showed up at his first Worlds, was not on a team that I expected to make the finals, but they did. And they got absolutely, yes, they took a game, but it was,
Yeah.
It was one of those, like, how you sometimes look at 3-0 and you're like, this is a lot closer than a 3-0. That was a 3-1 in the reverse situation.
And not close 3-1.
Yeah. But, like, he made a splash in that, right? And then it's like, okay, every year you kind of see him, like, trying to improve, trying to become a more well-rounded top laner, and trying to, take it all. I think Chovy in a similar situation, especially since, like, Faker is just so good. And he is the person that Chovy really has to overcome.
The final boss.
Yeah, in order to...
Of all of esports.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I think there's a lot of, like, commonalities between, like, a lot of shonen storylines that you'd see and League of Legends. And it's our job to tell those stories as accurately as possible.
True. I will always... One of my favorite animes, if not the favorite, because it is what it is Hajime no Ippo. Because it's just a boxing anime.
Oh, yeah. It's really, really good.
And it's about a story about, like, this guy who starts out in high school, bullied, all this stuff, helps out his mom, realizes, like, he is just naturally strong because a lot of his helping out his mother is, like, just carrying a lot of heavy stuff. Goes into boxing, and it's, like, trying to figure out what strength means. Tries to go for the featherweight championship, initially fails, loses to, like, Date Eiji, and then is now trying to be... Actually, I'm not caught up recently, but I'm not going to spoil. But it's like, basically, it's a big thing about somebody that is aiming to be the best, that has found failures time and time again. Because initially he's found success, but then you learn from your failures to the point that you had. Like, Faker's an old man, and he's been the best for a while. And there's been people who have been better than him individually, but when it matters most, he clutches up. And so at some point, Knight or Chovy, those who have failed, like, who've always been close, but have failed when it comes to, like, the final moments, though Chovy, of course, won MSI. That is what it is. And same with Knight.
Not Worlds.
Yeah, not Worlds. That moment's going to come, and it's going to taste sweeter through all of your failures. So I love shonen anime for that reason, because it's going to end good. If it ends bad, I'm throwing it in the trash.
Need a happy ending.
It's done, right? I ain't recommending that. But those are the type of stuff I love about sports anime.
Awesome. We're going to do a look ahead with Kia. Cloud9 versus TL. Who do we got?
Look, Jan was right when he said that this is the first time they're like underdogs. I think Cloud9 takes it.
Good answer.
I also think Cloud9 takes it because they're better team fighters right now.
We're all unbiased here. I'm going to say Cloud9 as well.
True, unbiased.
The only
I saw
one
your power
that had
rankings.
them is How do you feel about that? You're kind of vindicated almost.
Your power rankings is crazy.
You're on the way of
I
being
never
vindicated.
doubted
This is the most criminal thing of all time.
I never once doubted
that.
them.
That is insane.
Anyway, that's going to do it for us. Thank you for watching this episode of the Cloud9 Kia Forecast. Thank you, Raz and Emily, once again for joining me. Woo. And thanks everyone to watch. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any questions, leave them down below, and we'll get to them next time.